Dr. Gotland, I'd like to go to you first. The Social Security Administration's disability programs remain on GAO's high-risk list, due in part to SSA's continued use of outdated occupational data to make disability decisions. If I heard your testimony correctly, I think you said they've already spent something like $100 million to study this and to update it, but they're not using that information. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, that is correct. I believe the amount is higher. It's over $250 million.
$250 million. And the information is not being utilized?
As far as we know, yes, it is not being utilized.
So explain a little bit about why the Social Security Administration's use of this outdated occupational data is a contributing factor to its disability programs being on GAO's high-risk list.
Thank you for that question. So we have, on our high-risk list, there are two main areas. One for SSA is managing its backlogs, and one is modernizing its eligibility criteria. And the eligibility criteria are absolutely essential in deciding disability awards. So these are make or break decisions for people who are needing benefits. The occupational data in particular are something that dates back right now to the 1990s and even earlier to the 1970s. The Washington Post article, for example, highlighted one example of a vocation that still continues to be used, the pneumatic tube operator. And we thought, oh, maybe that would be something that wasn't realistic, that didn't really get invoked. But in fact, we just identified in preparing for this 2 recent federal court cases where pneumatic tube operator was cited as a viable occupation for someone applying for disabilities and part of the basis for their denial. So this is something that is of grave concern to the individuals who are applying for benefits who are unfairly denied. It is also costing Social Security Administration administrative costs in processing these cases, and in addition, it's costing the federal courts time and resources in processing those appeals.
Well, thank you. It sounds to me like if they were to actually effectively utilize the data that they have spent so much money to develop, that they could actually get better results in getting benefits to recipients and save money in the process. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, thank you. And Ms. Wilski, to shift topics here for just a moment, the Social Security Administration recently finalized a rule that they estimate will save about $1 billion in administrative costs in exchange for an additional $19.7 billion in mandatory spending for Social Security disability insurance benefits and supplemental security income payments on net over the next 10 years. The question I have is, when the SSA is considering a policy change to one of its programs, how does the agency evaluate trade-offs between the administrative savings and the increases in mandatory spending?
Thank you for the question. I'm not familiar with the policy that you're talking about, but I think in general we do tend to look at how the policies would affect our beneficiaries, how the policies would affect our ability to implement the program, as well as the cost to the federal government. I'd be happy to take that back for a fuller response.
Well, thank you. Then I think you just answered this, but I just want to ask it specifically. Do you agree that the Social Security Administration has a stewardship responsibility to taxpayers? And also, how is the almost 20-to-1 ratio? I guess you said you weren't familiar with that specific rule, but do you believe that the Social Security Administration, in adopting these rules, needs to have a stewardship responsibility not only to recipients, but also to the taxpayers?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.